Welcome to Ask a Catholic Therapist Anything. Today's question comes from John in Florida. He says, Amber, I'm embarrassed to write this, but my wife and I haven't been intimate in months. We've been married for years, and I know marriage has ups and downs, but I'm starting to wonder if this is normal or if it's a red flag. I keep asking myself if I'm doing something wrong or if she doesn't love me anymore. I don't want to pressure her, but I also don't want our marriage to lose the closeness that it had. As a Catholic, I know intimacy is important, but I'm confused about how to handle this. John, please don't be embarrassed. And thank you for writing in. I'm sure there are many people listening who can relate to your situation. Remember that if we only define intimacy as sex, then we set ourselves up for pressure and disappointment. It's important to have a broad definition of intimacy, like emotional, spiritual, and other types of comforting physical touch also matter. I think it's also important to ask what's driving the distance. Before assuming that it's you, it could be postpartum recovery, pregnancy, illness, chronic pain, medications, exhaustion, stress, body image, relationship strain. All of these things can lower desire. There would be a lot more that I need to know from you guys to make specific recommendations, but see if any of this fits. The two parallel goals that we want to keep in mind here is reducing the burden that makes closeness hard and increasing connection, meaning affection, time, honesty, so desire has room to grow. When you ask about, is this normal? The truth is there's no single normal number of occasions of physical intimacy between husband and wife. A large US survey showed a wide variation and a long-term decline in sexual frequency is expected. A nationally representative analysis found that Americans have 9 fewer times of intimacy per year in the early 1910s as they did in the 1990s. Declines were also seen among partnered or married adults, and age matters. People in their 20s averaged 80 times a year, while those in their 60s averaged 20 times a year. These are population averages, not quotas, and again, the distributions were very wide, which means you had some people with very low numbers and some with very high. So I'm not sure this is the best way to make comparisons. That said, I thought I'd give you some statistics. Historically, averages were quoted in about 50 to 60 times a year. Use this only as context since the more recent trend had a downward variation. Here's what the research shows us though. Quality and agreement matter more than quantity. Across multiple studies, well-being in couples rises with sexual frequency up to about once per week. After that, more frequent sex is not reliably linked to greater happiness. The takeaway here is that mutual connection and agreement are going to go further towards marital happiness than just the frequency. Communication is protective in marriage. Meta-analytic and review work show couples who comfortably discuss sexual desires, better sexual function, and higher relationship satisfaction. I think this is where couples who use natural family planning have a leg up. You have to be talking about these things, and it leads to a lot of benefits in and out of the bedroom. Many partners misjudge others' likes or dislikes without explicit conversation. So I think for Catholics and for other Christians as well, who were raised to believe that the appropriate place for sex is within a marriage, there can be this view that sex is bad, but that's not true. We know that the Catholic Church celebrates intercourse between a husband and a wife. It's a prayer. It's beautiful and it's life-giving. And so if our view, and subconsciously, is that it's bad, well, what's bad gets pushed into the shadows and not talked about. And so it's really important to be able to talk about these things with your spouse, even if it may be uncomfortable at first. I don't know where you and your wife are in your life and in the seasons of your marriage, but remember that postpartum seasons are real. Pain with intercourse is common after childbirth. The overall incidence is about 35%, but it's broken down into 42 to 43% at 2 to 4 months out and 22% at 6 to 12 months postpartum. Recovery and readiness vary person to person, and guidelines encourage individual and gradual return to intimacy, of course, checking with your doctor. Through a Catholic lens, mutual self-gift is not a performance. We remember, be subject to one another out of reverence for Christ. The Catechism teaches that marital intimacy is both unitive and procreative. It's a sign of spiritual communion, not just a number or a performance, which is a really hard change of thinking when we are saturated in our culture with messages that say something very different. And if either one of the partners sees intercourse as performance or as a way to keep the other person's interest in love, there can be a lot of pressure riding on that. And that stress makes it even more difficult to be ready for intimacy. Seasons and tenderness are also important. Pope Francis reminds us that marital love is expressed in many ways, and the erotic dimension belongs to marriage, but grows through patience, dialogue, and care. Remember biology and pacing. The desire often unfolds differently for men and women. The Basson model describes responsive desire, where emotional safety and non-sexual affection can preclude arousal and help for long-term relationships and in those postpartum seasons. So here's some practical steps that you might want to try this week. You could broaden your definition of intimacy. Work on rebuilding that non-sexual closeness, unrushed time, affectionate touch, shared prayer, small bits for connection. This lowers pressure and supports desire. Get curious about the causes, not the culpability, meaning get curious about what's going on in the relationship and make sure that we're not falling into whose fault is it. You could ask, what would help you feel more comfortable and connected rather than why don't you want me? Screen gently for fatigue, pain, stress, meds, body image, and mood changes. If your wife is postpartum, try to help her normalize the gradual return, and she could even consider pelvic floor PT if appropriate. Make sure you're careful about your own self-talk. Replace "she doesn't want me" with "we're in a demanding season. How can I make closeness easier for her?" Reframing this reduces conflict and improves problem solving. Also, maybe you could schedule some low-pressure check-ins, 15 minutes once a week. What worked, what didn't, and what is one small change for next week. Tie in that concrete action for each partner, like bedtime help, an earlier wind down for the kids, or a tech-free hour at night could be helpful. Make sure you align your expectations with the data, knowing that the data shows a wide range of normal. Remember that the goal is mutual satisfaction, not just a number or frequency. If necessary, consider medical or counseling consults. If there's persistent pain or dramatic hormone shifts, anxiety or depression, or unresolved emotional or physical injuries, encourage a clinician visit. If you continue to struggle, then short-term couples therapy that respects your faith and values can be very helpful. Counseling-based interventions are shown to improve sexual and marital satisfaction. You asked in your question about when you know that it's something to be concerned about. Here's some of the warning signs that you might want to look for. Ongoing avoidance plus contempt, stonewalling, or secrecy about relationship. And this doesn't necessarily mean another person, but it could be a secret relationship with food or substance or shopping. These can signal deeper distrust and often warrant professional help. And safety first. But here's some self-care while you're waiting for this season to change. Make sure you're praying daily with your spouse and ask for the grace to speak to each other with truth and clarity. Consider a brief shared prayer at night. And maintain one healthy physical outlet. The desire you have for your wife is beautiful, and it's one that creates a lot of energy. It's built inside of us, that energy to create. We are born to be connected with one another and to be creative. It's important not to push that down or pretend like it's not there, but to direct that into a healthy, holy means, like exercise or healthy male friendships or being part of a men's group or starting a volunteer project. This helps to get your body moving and make sure that the frustration doesn't fester. I'll link some good resources for you and your wife and John, all of the other people who are listening who have this question too, that are authentically Catholic, so you don't have to worry that there's going to be things that are contrary to our faith. It took a lot of courage to write in today, John, but I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who are like, phew, I'm so glad he did. I'll see you next time on Ask a Catholic Therapist Anything.